Hello and welcome to the Long COVID podcast. The Long COVID podcast is currently entirely self-funded, so if you've enjoyed what you've heard today and are able to, please do go to buymeacoffee.com/longcovidpod. You can also follow me on Facebook at Long COVID Podcast or on Instagram at Long COVID Pod. My guest today, Chiara Berardelli, is someone I've known for years and under better circumstances played music with, so it's wonderful to welcome her to the podcast. Thank you so much, Chiara, for coming onto my podcast. And
My pleasure.
It's lovely to see you.
You too. I haven't seen you for ages. Yeah.
It's been probably years. So I thought maybe we could just start off by you introducing yourself a little bit, if you're sort of comfortable with saying a little bit about what you do or what you did before COVID hit.
So I'm, what am I? That's always a difficult question to answer. I'm a musician and I'm a songwriter, and I used to have a different job. I used to be a GP, and I just say that because I left that job nearly 4 years ago now. So I'm still in the process of kind of building a career in music, having done something else for a long time. So that's why I always slightly struggle to answer that question, because I basically do a bit of this and a bit of that. And on one hand, that's been, since sort of getting ill, that's been quite an advantage to not have a fixed job, because I realised that for an awful lot of people, the stress of it has been not being able to work and not really having the sort of full understanding of what a sort of kind of long protracted thing is about.
Absolutely.
So I'm kind of grateful that, I realise that that's a huge part of the stress and I don't really have that. But I also find that part of what I've found difficult about it is just allowing myself to be ill, I think.
I think I sort of am obviously familiar with sort of what you do, and the sort of a lot of the aspect of that is that you end up having very busy weeks, and then you have weeks where you don't have so much, and it's a little bit sort of unplanned sometimes almost.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not always set hours, which, as you say, is a benefit and a curse.
Yeah, I think what I've found difficult is that at times I've thought, if I just had a job that I went to, I wouldn't, because a huge part of it for me has been, when you're ill or kind of when you're just past the little acute phase of being ill is not having any motivation. And when you're trying to do creative things, having no motivation, you're just this void. I've just felt like this void a lot of the time. And I've thought, if I just had a job that I just went to, I'd just get on with it. But then, it was actually you invited me to the Facebook group, and I read there some of the, a large part of what people talk about is the stress of maybe going back to work and then it's too much and not being able to work part-time, or their boss not understanding. And I mean, obviously that just makes you more ill, doesn't it?
It just adds to the stress, doesn't it? Yeah. Exactly. And I think what I've found, which I never really realised before, because I've always had boundless energy, is that how much sort of mental stress takes away your energy as well. And you get stressed about something, and it's
all tied in, isn't it?
Yeah. Maybe we could sort of talk a little bit just about, when you got ill and sort of what happened, and did you get any support? Because if you were anything like me, I didn't at all.
I mean, it was a bit different. I know you've told me that, when you had it, you were really like ill, like really short of breath and almost going into hospital. And it wasn't like that for me. And in fact, it took me a long time. And also, same as you, if you like me and you had it at the beginning and there was no testing, then you never... I've only assumed or calculated that this is what I've had on the basis of reading and, seeing what other people have got. But I got it the very first week of lockdown, and it was at first I just thought I had a not very nice virus, but it was different to anything I've had before, mainly because of the headache. That was the thing that really stood out for me. And when you've had viruses before, you kind of know how your body reacts to things, and this just felt really different. I had nausea, I had these bad headaches, and I didn't have the classic things. I didn't have loss of taste or, a bad cough or anything. So I didn't think, I just thought it was a virus, basically, a non-important virus. And then a month later, I had exactly the same thing. It maybe lasted a day less, maybe 6 days rather than 7 days, but it was the same thing. It was all the same symptoms. I was in bed for a few days, exhausted, the headache. And then I got it again another month later. So that was, March, April, May. And I was thinking, what's going on here, But I mean, I don't know. I think having been a doctor, I can sometimes be a bit slow about seeing things in myself, and I always think, oh, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm a bit like that. So, again, I wasn't really pinning it onto anything. And obviously at that point, it was all talk, wasn't it, about loss of smell, loss of taste, and, these are the symptoms. And
Yeah. Yeah, there were the three symptoms, and if you didn't
yeah,
have the three symptoms, you didn't even. I mean, I was very similar to you. I didn't get any of those symptoms.
no,
It wasn't until I started getting the shortness of breath that I thought, oh,
yeah,
this. So I guess I probably realised a lot earlier than you did.
yeah.
But I think as well at this point, long COVID didn't really exist
No, not
at
at
this
all.
point.
Of course not.
That they were saying you'll recover within a week, and then they were saying, oh well, it might take 2 weeks, it might take up to a month, but there
Yeah,
wasn't really anything
no.
else, was
And
there?
also, for the people that were in hospital, the people that were ventilated, there was obviously a very, then there's a recovery from that. But if you're not in that situation, you don't expect to be ill for a while. And I mean, I guess nobody knew anything about anything really, did they? At that point, I guess
Yeah.
that's how it was. So that sort of went on. And then June, July, August, it started. I still wasn't thinking. I spoke to the doctor, I spoke to the GP, who I have to say wasn't very helpful. And I had some blood tests because I'm on medication and I get blood tests anyway. So I had some blood tests done. Obviously, they didn't show up anything. And then for the next 2, 3 months, it started getting better. It would just come on, but it didn't last a week. It would last a day, sometimes 2 days, and then it would be gone. And it would just come over me like all of a sudden, this kind of, weak feeling and slightly achy, and but then the next day it'd be gone. It was really strange. So I just thought, oh well, whatever that is, it's not lasting as long as it did. It's going away. And then on the end of August, I went on a cycling holiday, which I hadn't really done a lot of cycling, obviously, over the period of time. And normally I would, go on a cycling holiday and I'd be absolutely fine because I love cycling and I do lots of cycling. So I went and we did, 3 days of more miles than I'd done for ages, and probably drank more than I had for ages as well. And basically after that, that was when it kind of all really kicked off. And I don't know whether it was I obviously thought I was okay, and maybe I set something off by doing concentrated exercise in a few days. I have no idea, but the next few months leading up to Christmas were just terrible. Basically, through the whole month of October, I pretty much had a permanent headache. I had about 3 days I didn't have a headache. And I just felt, I was trying to describe to people how I felt. I felt like I was poisoned. I felt like my physical body wasn't my own, in the sense that I didn't feel like I normally did. And it wasn't just being a bit tired or a bit this or a bit that. It was much more than that. So I think in December, I ended up going to see the GP, who referred me to a neurologist because, I mean, obviously she was trying to rule out brain things.
Anything else? Yeah.
But I said to her, funnily enough, the reason I actually went to see her was I wanted to find out, did she think it could be long COVID? Because at that point, I started to think
you were hearing about it by that point,
yeah,
weren't you? There must have been sort of support groups and stuff by then.
Yeah, and I wanted to, when it all kind of kicked off in September, I was trying to get the antibody test to see whether, I thought, well, if I just know what it is, then I'll feel that'll be good. So I thought, if I get the antibody test and I've got the antibodies, I'll know that I'd had it, and that's what it is, and then at least that'll give me kind of some kind of peace of mind. But then I couldn't get the test anywhere up here, and then obviously you could buy it in the chemist, but then it all sold out. And a friend of mine who's a GP said, well, it's not consistent. Usually when you get antibodies to a virus, they stay in your bloodstream, but with COVID it seemed to be that they can fall off. And so she was kind of saying, well, if they're not there, you don't know that you didn't have it. And that was all, what am I doing? And then eventually I got to this point that I thought, well, it doesn't matter it doesn't matter whether I've had it or not. Like, I still have these symptoms to deal with. So I managed to just kind of accept that, which was really good. But funnily enough, whenever I tried to share with people how I was feeling, everybody then went into did you get the test? And have you had oh yeah, when I asked the GP, do you think it could be long COVID? The GP said, No, 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 because it's only people with shortness of breath and chest pain that have long COVID.
Mm,
I said, oh, okay, and she said, anyway, there's nothing we can do about that.
that's
And
helpful.
yeah, well, the thing is, like, I know that, but that wasn't why I wanted to know if I had it. And that really struck me that, like, chronic things, managing a chronic thing is a lot about managing, it's all about managing it yourself. So it isn't that you necessarily go to the doctor for a fix for it, you go to the doctor for just some help with managing it,
Yeah.
you know?
And sometimes I think at least having a label on it, it gives you sort of an idea, doesn't it?
Well, of
You
course
sort of
it
know what you're
does.
dealing with.
Of
Um,
course, of course. And then you can read about it and you can. So that kind of really struck me. So then I spoke to the neurologist and he decided that I had chronic menopausal migraine because clearly, sorry, I'm sounding really negative here, but clearly I'm a woman of a certain age.
so many people have been told the same.
And I know, you know, anyway, I know I don't have or I didn't have chronic menopausal migraine. And so I said, or did he think it could be long COVID? And of course, that's not his specialty. And he was saying, well, it's not most people with post-viral stuff, it doesn't last as long as this. And I was thinking, well, that's rough,
That's not
and
very helpful because here am I with all these symptoms, this long post viral.
and I said, what about the fact that it comes on when I exercise, when I try and do anything physical? Oh, no, no, no. Anyway, he wanted to put me on medication, and so what we decided was I was just going to try a migraine tablet if the headaches came on, but it wasn't migraine. The headaches weren't migraine. I tried to tell him this, but anyway, I ended up not taking them. I was still trying to do exercise when I felt well, partly because I wanted to for my mental health, but all those things. And I realized that I got obviously worse after it. So that's the point at which I stopped doing any exercise, or I think it was a few weeks after that. And things started to improve headache wise when I stopped doing any exercise. I mean, I can imagine that the medical profession, obviously, there's this new thing happening, and so they haven't caught up with that, and also they were really stressed at that time with COVID generally, and all the hundreds of millions of people coming along with symptoms, and not being able to see a doctor and the waiting list, and I didn't really find my interactions very helpful, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it's a funny one, isn't it? Because you sort of in any normal time, any person presenting with any of these symptoms would, they'd get sent off to all sorts of different specialists. And I mean, if I said that I had chest pains and shortness of breath, which I did a lot of the time, they'd be sending you off for all sorts of
I know,
tests and things,
I
wouldn't
know,
they?
I
Just
know,
straight away. And yet, because we're in the middle of a pandemic,
I know.
and there are so many different things going on and so many people in worse situations, people with actually quite worrying symptoms, sort of, and you can sort of understand why, but it doesn't make it any
But
less frustrating for
no, but
us, does it?
I also think in my situation that I know a lot of people do hang on the tests and the blood tests, and I know from being a GP that often you can have a chronic thing like this and or a kind of post-viral thing, and there's nothing wrong with any of the blood tests. So sometimes it isn't about the test, it's just about really listening to what that person's telling you about their story and working out. And that's the thing that's helpful, that would have been helpful to me, to someone to help to talk about, well, I don't know what virus it was, but it sounds like a post-viral thing.
Mm-hmm.
But everyone was trying to go, oh, could it be, headaches? Could it be a brain tumor? Could it be this? Could it be that? Well, actually, the bigger picture is that it's a post-viral thing, which
Something.
I kind of worked out for myself. But that's the thing about the medical profession. I think it's kind of geared up to making a diagnosis about something that you can do something about, not about something that you can't do something about.
And I suppose, having medical knowledge of your own, I suppose it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? In some
Yeah,
ways it's helpful because you know what you need to worry about. I mean, again,
yeah,
like when I was having horrible chest pains and stuff, it was sort of like, do I need to worry about this?
I know,
And having zero medical knowledge of my own, I had no idea. So I had a panic attack
no,
and my partner called the paramedics. But I guess, having a bit of knowledge might help you in some ways, but does it
yes.
make you more frustrated in other ways?
I
Um,
think so. Because I'm generally not someone who worries. For example, when I was having the really bad headaches, I think somebody probably said, "Oh, maybe you should see the doctor. Maybe it's not that." And I never worry about things like that. I never think, "Oh, it could be a brain tumor. It could be this. It could be that." It's more for me. It was more about, why do I not feel normal? How do I feel normal again? And what can I do about that? And to manage something, as you say, it is actually helpful to have a label, because then you, if you can, because then you know what you're dealing with and you can find out all the information that there is about it. But
Yeah.
without that, you're kind of in the dark, aren't you? And
Yeah, you don't even know what to look into,
where
do
to
you?
start? No.
Whereas, and I guess a lot of the problems with long COVID is that there's so many different elements of it as well. So yes, there's still so much, but at least having that label, you know that it's not something else.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
you don't have to worry about whatever else it could be, and you can sort of just focus on trying
I
to
think
find your way through it.
I think also, again, having been a doctor, I just thought, well, what's wrong? I mean, we are in a pandemic. Maybe I'm just reacting to that, or maybe my relationship was splitting up because my then partner couldn't come over from New Zealand. So I'm thinking, am I just, is it to do with that? Am I sad? Am I this? Am I that? And or maybe I'm just being lazy that I can't, all of these things and every time I would have a bout of it, then when I would feel better, I would sort of think, well, I wasn't well, you know. But when I was in it, I just thought, what's wrong with me that I'm feeling like this? Pull yourself together, Kiara, that sort of thing.
It is, isn't
Uh,
it? People
yeah,
tell you to snap out of it, stay positive. Somebody I know who also struggles with, not with long COVID, but with different sort of longer term thing, and she said that the most helpful thing that anyone had ever said to her was that if anyone told you to stay positive, to imagine yourself punching them in the face.
yeah. No, I get that. I get that.
And I could totally understand that, because I think people mean well,
Mm,
but they have no idea,
mm,
unless they've
mm,
actually dealt with that or something like that. They have no
mm.
idea what you're dealing
No,
with, and
no,
I think because of that, they don't know what to say.
no.
So they often end up saying completely the wrong thing.
The hardest thing I found was myself not being critical of accepting. I'm not, in fact, I do think I've learned a lot, but like I think everybody, I'm sure you have, sure everybody does
Absolutely.
with something, but I've learned to be more patient with myself, and just to accept the way that I am. Okay, this is how I feel. I mean, I'm not saying I do it every time, but when I look at the whole, the sort of length of time of me having it from the start till now, I mean, at the beginning, and I was so hard on myself. And actually, for every bout I'd have, when I was in bed, the first couple of days when you feel really bad and you're in bed, in some ways that wasn't the bad bit, because usually I'd just sleep through that, and that's okay. When you're asleep, you're asleep. It was the few days between feeling like that and feeling like well enough to do anything where I wasn't, I was just sort of mooching around feeling sort of non-specifically ill, and I found those days really, really difficult, because I'd just be going, come on, Chiara, get something done, and I couldn't, and I'd get so upset and so frustrated, and oh god, I just, bloody hell, it was hard.
Yeah, no, I completely understand. You're lying on the sofa and you think, well, I'm not that ill, but as soon as you start trying to do something, you can't cope with
No.
it. You sort of think. I mean, I had a couple of days ago where I was sort of sitting on the sofa, and then I got up to go and put the shopping away, and I found myself like having to hold on to the counter to stand up just by
Mm,
putting the shopping away, and you think this is ridiculous.
mm,
And then you go and lie down for a bit, and you sort of think, right, okay, I don't feel so bad again. I'll try something else, and then you just, and it's those sort of days where it's invisible, isn't it?
mm,
Anybody looking at you
mm,
would think that you don't look that ill,
no.
but they don't see what happens
No,
underneath,
I
do
mean,
they?
it's when you realize that energy is, you never think about not having energy until you don't have energy. I mean, what is that? Like, you just, like, you live your life and you've got energy. I mean, some days you're tired, but and then when you have something like this that just seems to literally take away your energy so much that you can't do anything, you think, oh, it's like an engine, isn't it, with no
Yeah,
petrol in it, and
it
it's
is.
really, it's like you can't really surmount it. You can't get over it by
No,
being positive or pushing yourself. It just is how it is. And
yeah.
in a way, once I kind of started to accept that, it sort of, certainly mentally, things got a lot easier for me.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm struggling with, is the acceptance bit. You get better at managing things and thinking, right, when I'm feeling tired, I'm going to try and do less. I'm not going to go out and try and walk around town if I'm feeling tired. Whereas before, I
Mm,
would sort of make myself do it because I felt
you
like I ought
know,
to get outside. It's yeah, actually accepting that this is the new you.
I think
It's
I think,
especially for somebody who's generally active, like,
yeah,
we're both sort of normally
yeah,
quite active people, and
yeah.
a lot of what we do for work as well is quite sort of
Mm,
physically demanding as well as, and it's, yeah, it's very hard to accept that you can't do that.
definitely.
And you sort of were talking a bit about what you had got from your GP and everything, and you had, it sounds like you had a few sort of chats and appointments, and you saw your neurologist. Was there any other sort of support that you felt like you needed?
Funnily enough, well, you introduced me to the Facebook group, and
Mm.
I tend to look at it when I'm feeling bad because I try and see, oh, is there anything new that someone's doing that? And the first time I looked at it, I read this post that said, I've had a headache for 282 days, and I just thought, oh no, this isn't, because I'd had a headache, say at that point, for like 20 days, and
Oh
I thought,
gosh.
have I got another 240 to go? It's quite hard going, and sometimes people, I mean, I get it's good that people have just got somewhere to rant about it and to kind of empathize with each other, and sometimes people do write. I like to know that some people have got better. I
Yes.
think we need to know that. And there was one guy wrote something I found really helpful, because I think what happens, because I'm sure I've been there myself with other things, you get better and then you don't. Of course, you're not going to look on the Facebook group anymore.
Yeah,
But
because
this
why would
guy,
you go back to that depressing phase of your
exactly,
life? Yeah.
exactly. But this guy had written something like, "Oh, well, I just wanted to let people know that, and often it is very active people that get it. I mean, so this guy had been, very active, and he said, I'm back to doing pretty much everything. And he said, and I think he'd had it for a year or something. And he said, oh, my advice is listen to your body and try and accept the way you are, and don't try and push that. Try and avoid drama. So, drama things in your life, drama. He said, only don't watch anything. He said, just watch cartoons and singing dogs or something like that. It was like, basically try and make things light-hearted around you. And weirdly enough, I'd started watching. I like Scandinavian stuff, and just because I wasn't feeling well, and I was kind of like in the evenings, I'd ended up watching loads of really dark stuff. And I think that's absolutely fine when you're feeling okay. But I kind of realized that maybe that's not helping me, so I stopped. I stopped watching any of that, and I think that was a good thing. And I thought his advice was really good. It wasn't like, do this, do that, don't eat this thing, don't eat that thing. It's just kind of take your time and rest if you need to, because that's actually the only thing that you can do. Try and sort of simplify your life. And at times I have found the Facebook group helpful. Sometimes I felt a bit guilty because my thing hasn't been as bad as a lot of the people's that I read. And then I try and tell myself, well, so, this is just my experience. It doesn't have to be
Yeah.
bedbound for a year to find it difficult. But there are obviously a lot of people that are really, really bad with it. I started going for counselling probably about this time last year, just online about other stuff, but that has been really helpful to me through this. It's just a private counsellor that I've been seeing every week, and what's really helped me about talking to her is in the line of the acceptance of it, because it's very much pushed me to the limit of my patience with myself. And if you're frustrated with yourself over it, it's just completely unhelpful. It just makes you feel worse, makes you feel
Adds, yeah,
upset,
adds to the
and
stress, doesn't it?
yeah, upset and physically ill.
Mm.
So I have to say that the timing of that was really. And the other thing that I think happens when you have, I mean, I think probably everyone's like this as a human, that the things that we do in our lives that we enjoy, but they also distract us from stuff going on in our heads. And if you're ill, you're not used to kind of sitting about that much, then I think and the pandemic, I think we've all had more time to think, which can be helpful, but it can also be quite difficult. And so, various things are sort of coming to the surface, which is why I went to speak to her to begin with. But then in the end, it's been really helpful. Just how do I treat myself through something which is, like you said, it's open ended. You don't know when you're going to get better, and lots of interesting things came up, like not having a diagnosis and not being able to explain to people what it was. And she was kind of saying, well, why do you need to do that? And I would sort of say, well, suppose if I can explain to people what it is, then it's real. And she's saying, well, it is real. If you're
Yeah.
feeling it, it's real, you know. So that's quite interesting, I think. And you know, what difference is it going to make if someone, or because then they'll be able to accept that there's something wrong with you. And she's very much helped me with, well, it doesn't really matter what everyone else thinks, actually. You know, it's about you and how you cope with it. And so that's been really helpful. I wouldn't say, where else have I got support? With some of my, you know, just some of my friends and family, but it's a very difficult thing to understand, I think. I've got a friend who's had chronic fatigue type thing in the past and still gets, you know, ill occasionally if she does too much. And so she totally understands it. And that's been really helpful because she just gets it, basically.
Yeah, it is. It's hard to understand. You know, if
Yeah,
you've not had it. I mean, I'm very lucky. I've got Malky, but and he's seen me every step of the way through it. So
yeah,
he understands it to an extent,
yeah,
and he knows sort of, you know, without really having to ask, by looking at me,
yeah,
he
how
can tell
you
how I'm
are, yeah.
feeling. But at the same time, he doesn't get it because he's not
No,
living through it. It's
no,
in the same way. And you know, you think even somebody who's seen it, you know, is still doesn't quite
I
understand. So
know, I know,
I think that's why things like support groups, they are helpful to an extent, aren't they?
yeah.
Like you say, you know, you've got to be in the right mood for it.
I suppose sometimes it's just a place to say, I feel this and I feel that, but not actually give support, you know, and that's fine. But when there's just a lot of very frustrated people, and I have to say, you know, because I live on my own, and it's been like, I think one of the things that I found is that living on my own is not a problem in normal times because you can go out and see people and people come round, and that's fine. But through the pandemic and having this,
It's so isolating, isn't
yeah,
it?
there's
Yeah.
been a lot of times it's been really, you know, when I went through the real kind of headache phase, and you don't really feel like phoning anyone because you just feel ill, and you don't want to say I feel ill again because that just seems, you know, like I'm a broken record, you know. And so you end up not phoning anyone, and no one can come around anyway, and you can't go out. And the place I would say I've had the most support is I've got two neighbours of mine who we spent a lot of time together in the kind of early days of lockdown because we're all in the same block, and we got into the garden and sort of doing stuff in the garden together because they've seen it from the start as well. They just know really how it
Yeah.
is, you know.
I think,
Yeah,
yeah, I think that's maybe sort of that, you know, having seen it all the way through,
yeah,
that makes people realise how it's sort of it's been. I mean, I find, you know, I don't post that much on things like Facebook, certainly not about how I'm feeling, because, you know, I don't want to moan in public.
I know,
You know,
I know.
I'll moan in private and I'll
Yeah,
moan to myself and I'll kick things and I'll get frustrated and I'll get upset. But publicly, you know, you want to put your best face forward, don't you? So, you know, people that do know, you know, they sort of forget. So then, you know, you get the, oh, are you still ill? Are you not better yet? And you think, well, no, of course I'm not, but because you've not been shouting about it
no.
from the rooftops,
I
how is
actually,
anyone supposed to know?
I actually tell, you know, I mean, I've had a couple of things in my life I've had to deal with which are difficult to understand and have gone on and on. So I have got quite used to just talking about things that people don't understand and things that make people feel a bit uncomfortable. And now I just tell, if I haven't seen someone for a while and they say, how are you? And I say, oh, well, I've had long COVID. And, you know, I just say it, I just talk about it. And people are a bit sort of, oh, you know, but I just think, well, I'd rather just talk about it and get people understanding that there's this thing out there and
Yeah,
it's not easy.
it's not, is it? Especially when you're used to being fit and healthy
Yeah.
and energetic and things. It's hard. Um,
One thing I definitely found with it, aside of the difficulty of accepting it and kind of learning to cope with it, you know, when I've been ill with the bouts of it, it really affects my mood. And I know you get that with any, you know, if you're ill with any virus, it makes you feel a bit down, doesn't it? Well, that's not what I felt like
mm,
with this. That was much worse than that. And I've had depression in the past, and it was kind of very similar to, you know, on a sort of brief week of whatever I was feeling it. It was very similar to being depressed, you know. I wouldn't say that then I would get better. I wouldn't say that I've been like, you know, permanently depressed with it. It's just, but those few days of being like really ill with it, my thoughts were just, oh, you know, really, really down. And that's quite hard to cope with and hard to explain, you know.
yeah.
You know, am I getting depressed again? And, you know, and all that sort of thing. And then I would start to feel physically better and my mood would
Yeah.
lift, you know.
Yeah, I think as you, if we've maybe had things like depression in the past, I mean, I also, had things like that, and you start to notice the symptoms, don't you? And
Mm,
then you start to worry about it because you think, oh, I don't want
mm.
to go back there.
No,
But at the same
no.
time, it's so, the way I deal with stress is to exercise.
Mm,
I will go out for a 10-mile run, or I'll, spend a couple of days in the mountains, and I can't do those sort of things
no,
anymore,
no.
which makes
God,
it
no.
more difficult to deal with, doesn't it? But I mean, mental health, I think, and over long-term health stuff, it's a huge thing, isn't it?
Yes.
You're not yourself for
No,
and it's not
no.
like you say, it's not just a short virus where you're feeling like rubbish for a week.
Yeah,
It's I mean, I've been ill now for nearly 17 months,
yeah,
which is it's such a long time, isn't it?
yeah,
And you're similar length of time,
yeah,
aren't you?
yeah.
How on earth are you supposed to deal with that?
Yes,
When you're used to being active and
yeah. We had some snowy weather that I'm sure you remember in January,
oh, it's
and
gorgeous, wasn't it?
so I went for a walk, just a little hill. I went for a walk up one of the Kilpatrick hills, and so I thought, right, okay, I'd been feeling all right for a week or so. I'm going to go and do this, and then I was with a group of folk, and we got up to a certain point, and I said, right, I'm not going to go to the top. Got down, and then the day after that, or sometimes 2 days after that, which is what it's like. Sometimes it's crashed again, and then I think a week after I went on a maybe an hour and a half bike ride, something like that, and it happened again, and that's when I just thought I have to stop doing anything. I can't because it's not worth it, and it definitely is affecting it. I was quite slow to sort of put that together, but so that's when I stopped, and that's when things, the headaches started to improve, and you know, maybe not the fatigue, but definitely the headaches. And so it was a good thing to stop doing anything. But oh my God, it killed me. It killed me because that walk in the snow on a bright day in January was in the middle of lockdown was just amazing. It was
Yeah.
amazing. And it does everything. It totally lifts your soul, doesn't it? So and then, there's the WhatsApp group of people going walking every weekend after that, and eventually you have to come off that because
Yeah.
it hurts.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah, I'm the
Yeah,
same. I've had to unfollow groups and unfollow people
yeah,
on Facebook because and these people are my friends, and
yeah,
that you're usually posting pictures every week from the mountains, and yeah, it's something about seeing everybody else doing it, and
yeah,
when you can't,
yeah.
it's not just like a weekend where you're busy where you can't go
No,
out.
no, no, no,
It's a
no.
year and a half of not being able to do these things.
The
Um,
thing that I got into that I find I couldn't do it all the time, but I got into wild swimming last year, and I did it right until December,
oh,
um,
that's brave.
in a wetsuit. But I could see because I was thinking, well, it's not really. I don't really swim. I just dunk really,
Yeah,
and I didn't really think I was doing exercise, but it was making me feel good. But as it got colder, even that temperature, the fact that your body loses temperature and you have to heat yourself up, that uses energy.
energy.
So I had to stop. I realized that even that was making me ill. And actually, I didn't want to get in the water in December because I didn't feel like strong enough.
Hmm.
So I stopped in about December, and then I really missed that as well because that's really the only thing I was doing. So I started again in about April when the weather got warmer, and again I had to be careful, like depending on how I was. But I've had little spells of doing it a couple of times a week even, and now the water's warm, so now I can do it in a swimming costume without a wetsuit, and the water's actually warm.
It's lovely,
And
isn't it?
it's wonderful because it's really short. It doesn't involve a lot of energy, but it makes you feel like you've had contact with nature, and it gives you a little bit of that feeling that you get when you get to the top of a mountain, of that sense of perspective, but without the effort, without the time. And I really hope I can keep doing that this year, but it's been really, really good.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. It just makes you feel like you got outside, I guess, doesn't it?
Yeah, makes your body feel alive.
I guess it's all about trying to find ways to make yourself feel alive, to feel
Absolutely.
like you are still you,
Yeah,
but without setting off all these symptoms. And I don't know, I've found as time goes on that, I'm not that good at it, but I can work out some of the things that are going to set me off. So, exercise is obviously a big one. So I'll do sort of bits of things if I'm feeling okay, but I'm getting better at not pushing it. And things like stress and avoiding, sort of different things like that. If you found avoiding triggers, you can sort of work it out a bit.
Yeah, the thing is that you've got things. I mean, like you say, when you feel that took me a long time to work out that when you feel well, you also can't do stuff
Yeah.
because then you get ill, and that's really frustrating because you think, well, actually, I feel all right and I want to. So I find that one quite difficult. And also, if you then do set it off, not to give yourself a hard time about
Yeah.
that, blah 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 blah. And the stress side of things, I mean, like I was saying with my work, I'm lucky in a way that don't have that thing. But my mum isn't very well, and so we take turns in the family to help with her basically. And she lives about 100 miles north of here. So what I find whenever I've been up for a few days with her, I don't know if it's the drive, I don't know if it's being with her, but I normally crash a bit after that. And the last couple of times it's been not so bad, and I hate saying this, but I think I'm getting better. The last few weeks I've started feeling better. I've had a
That's
good,
awesome.
yeah, I've had a 2 3 week spell now of being all right, apart from the odd headache and blah. So I think things are getting better. I really do. But I know that takes me sort of down a level, and therefore then you've got to be careful about that. And I mean, I stopped drinking ages ago to see if that helped. I maybe have the occasional beer, but on the whole, I don't drink anymore, which is a big thing. And just, making sure you've got enough sleep. But that's another thing so I got back from mum's last week and I thought, oh, I'm all right, And then a couple of days after I got back, like the headaches started and I was like knackered and thought, oh, well, that's probably just a delayed reaction of it. And then I can't sleep when I'm sort of, I mean, I'm not in it as bad as I was before, but I've had a few nights that I haven't slept properly. And I don't know if it's because when you don't have energy, then you don't really do much, and then you can't sleep. I don't know.
Because you don't feel tired. Yeah,
Yeah,
I find exactly the same. I have sort of weeks where my sleep is awful. And
yeah,
when you don't sleep, it makes everything else so much worse. And when you're fit and healthy, you'd have a bad night's sleep, you feel a bit groggy at work the next day, and then you sleep well the night after and you're fine. But
yeah.
when you're ill with something like this, you have a night without
You
sleep
can't,
and it can set you off, can't it?
yeah, you can't risk it. It's like and like you say, it's a kind of mental. It's almost like a physical. It's a mental tiredness, but not a physical tiredness.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like we were saying before we came on, we were talking about yoga, and I'm a very sporadic yoga person. So I would go to classes and then not, and I used to think, oh, I'd really love to be one of these people that did yoga every day. Well, that's what I do now. Although as I've started to feel better, I've noticed I've already stopped doing it. But for several months, I was really, I did, because that's one thing I can do.
Yeah.
And it's not vigorous yoga. And it's just sort of, I did loads of the yoga for headaches. I did that every morning, and just a kind of 15-20 minute thing. What I found really good about it is you felt you were doing something, and also the nice voice of the yoga teacher was telling you to be good to yourself. And I found that really, it's like the voice of self-compassion every day.
Sometimes you just need to hear it, don't you? I mean, it's funny you say that because, yeah, I had never done yoga in my life. I've always been told that it's a good thing, and I thought, oh, yeah, sure, yeah, great, but I'd rather go for a run. And then I was through a friend of a friend, got put in touch with this guy who was doing this long COVID breathing kind of
Oh yeah,
classes and yoga
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
things. And having never done yoga in my life, I've now done yoga pretty much every day for the
Yeah.
last 2 months. And it's exactly what you say. It makes you feel like you're doing something. If you're lying on the floor holding a pose for 5 minutes, which is not very energetic, but it's something. And the thing that I found, I think we touched on it earlier, is my brain does not stop. I find it really hard to switch off. And this yoga it makes you be
Mm,
still,
mm.
which is what I find that I need.
I
So
also think the breathing is really
yes.
good. Well, you've had problems with breathing.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't really, apart from just when I get to the top of my stairs, I'm a bit short of breath, which I didn't used to be then. But I don't know if that's just because I'm unfit now, or I don't really know the reason for that.
It's
But
hard to know, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
I haven't had these sort of acute thing or chest pain or anything like that. But I think to breathe into your body, especially when you can't do other stuff, is just really, really, really important. And also, if you spend, the times when you're really ill with it and you have like lots of time that in bed, and you're just kind of crunched up in bed, and just to even kind of stretch that out and it's like having a bit of contact positive contact with your body, when I think a lot of the time when you're ill with this, you really hate your body, don't you?
Yeah, yeah, you
But
feel like you've been betrayed,
you
don't you?
feel like
Um,
exactly, it's
my body's let me down.
totally let me down. I hate it. Like, why can't you do this? Why can't you do that? So you're sort of going, it's okay, body, I know you're in there, and
We're
so
working on it. We're working on
yeah,
it.
absolutely.
Yeah, some of that sort of self-love. But yeah, I think like yeah, like you say, we're not very good at that.
I know this is a difficult question to answer, but maybe it's because I used to be a doctor. I don't know. I always have to find out the reasons for things. I'm like, why is this that, and why is that that? And I kind of think, well, why did I get ill? Why did I get this? My counsellor was actually, we talked about what was happening the year before, this happened,
Mm-hmm.
and my dad died, and he was really ill for like quite a few months, and we looked after him, and I was in this relationship that was toing and froing to New Zealand, all of it, and I sometimes wonder whether it's not to doubt that there's a virus and that I've got some kind of post-viral thing, but it's just about my susceptibility to something. Also, I had 2 courses of antibiotics that year for infections, which I've never would normally get. So I just wonder whether my system was affected in a certain way that then when you get the virus, you can't fight it or whatever. I mean, have you ever thought about that? Like what
It's
might
really
have made you?
interesting you said that because I like answers. If something happens, I want to know why, and I'll sort of talk my round and round in circles. It's like, does this cause that? What does drives Milky nuts? But it's interesting you say about what happened before because sort of January, February, just before I got ill, because I got ill the week before lockdown. I felt like I was fighting off a cold. When you're sort of you've got a cold and you're sort of fighting it, fighting it, fighting it, and being in schools at that time of year, it's
Everyone's
a
got a cold,
cesspit
yeah,
of
yeah.
germs. So I was sort of doing everything I could. Someone said take echinacea and steam bowls and all of that just to try and fight this off. So yeah, I wonder if maybe my immune system was a little bit out of
Mm.
whack at that point. It was a little bit off. So then when I did pick up COVID, and who knows where I got it from, when you're in schools and on trains and stuff, it was everywhere. We
Yeah,
at the
yeah,
time we
yeah,
didn't
yeah.
realise, did we? But it was
No.
everywhere.
I kind of wondered, obviously, more people have had this virus in a concentrated way than viruses normally. Post-viral symptoms or syndrome, whatever you want to call it, has been around forever, but just we've probably never recognized it as much as we do now
So
because,
much numbers, isn't it? I think
yeah,
that's the
exactly.
concentration of it.
But it also has made me wonder how much people are under stress and various things before, and are just kind of muddling through, and then you get this thing, and their bodies have just gone, no, I can't deal with this, and they've had this. You just, or whether it's just because COVID has caused that more than other viruses, I don't know. Because people lead very, very stressful lives, don't they? And we
Yeah.
just manage that, we think we're all right, and we just manage it, and
And it takes something like this to completely take the floor out from under you to
yeah,
realise that actually you need to sort of, change things about your
yeah.
life that, should probably be permanent changes even.
I'd like to think that I will always do, but I've already proven that that isn't the case because I've not been doing it in the last few weeks. But I'd like to think that I'll do yoga every morning, but
Yeah.
I'd like to think that would be the case. But we don't, I'll do that when I feel the need rather than as a permanent thing.
And when you're busy, you forget about the things that you should be doing and you
Yeah,
concentrate on the things that have to be done, don't
yeah,
you?
yeah, yeah,
And that's
yeah.
human nature. And
And the fun things, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Oh well, I'd rather go out on the hills than stay in and lie on my yoga mat.
Have you found playing music helpful or?
Yes and no. I've actually just I learned violin last year. It was a sort of I need something to do that's not
New
energetic, and
and challenge?
playing an instrument is energetic to a level, but at the same time you can sit on the sofa and play violin, and you can do it in bits, and it seems a little bit less physical than the cello, which is so
No,
much
I get
bigger as
that.
well.
Yeah, I get
Um,
that. Yeah,
so I've really enjoyed having that to sort of get stuck into. Feels like I'm achieving something. It
yeah,
drives Malky crazy.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but it's been quite good fun, and I've done some sort of music videos and bits and pieces and things of recording, and all things that I would maybe have done before, but didn't have that much time. So I've definitely done things, and it's been quite
Mm.
nice to feel like I'm achieving something, because
Yes.
there's so much of that, like you were saying about, self-worth and feeling like, you're kind of useless.
Yes.
If
Yes.
you can achieve something, even if it
Yeah.
takes you 3 days longer than it would normally have done,
I know.
it's quite nice to have sort
I
of
know. I know. It's
say,
true.
I did that.
And also that you've kind of done something positive out of a difficult
Yeah,
situation, isn't it? You wouldn't have done that if things had been kind of ticking along as normal. So you can say, oh,
exactly.
well, although things were rubbish, this is what I did with it, you know? That's a good feeling.
Yeah, yeah, I think
Mm,
it is, and I'm always doing something,
mm,
so
mm,
at least it was a something that I could kind of do in my
mm,
own way, sort of thing.
mm.
So, I'm not really one for sitting and watching TV all day. I've never
No,
done that.
no, no,
I just,
no.
I have the sort of mental capacity of a 3-year-old. I can read for quite a long time if I'm feeling up to it, but watching stuff, I just get so bored, and then I start doing
Mm,
something else. So I'm sort
mm.
of using double the energy. So it's
Yes,
almost
yes,
worse
yes,
sometimes.
yes.
Um, I've found your energy levels are so different day to day. It's hard to
Yeah,
know what you can do because
I know, I
right,
know.
I'm feeling quite good today. Right, well, I'll go and do this, and then the next day you think, right, well, I did that yesterday, so I can do that again, and you realise that the next day your levels are so low that actually it needs to be a sofa day. It's going back to acceptance again, isn't it? I think.
I was working in a youth club and I stopped doing it. It was only once a week, it was every Tuesday, but it was so unpredictable how I was, and I kept being ill. And I just felt like it was better if, they got someone else, or at least they knew that I wasn't coming. And that was just one day a week. That's why I think that if you've got stuff that you have to be at regularly, and you don't know and you don't want to give it up, but it's unpredictable and
It
it's just
is, yeah, that
too much.
unpredictability. It means, it's making any sort of plans.
Mm,
Could meet up with a friend tonight, but I don't know how I feel.
yeah.
It's difficult to deal with. And I think what I've certainly noticed that over the last sort of few weeks, maybe a few months, as things have opened up, it's all becoming a bit more obvious that we can't do things and everybody else can.
Mm,
When
mm,
everyone was in lockdown together, it was
I think that's really,
almost easier.
I think
Um,
that's really true because you were just sort of in and kind of nursing yourself in the evenings, and suddenly people were out doing stuff, and the weather was good and this and that, and yeah, that's really interesting you should say that. I'd not really thought about it like that, but for me, I was feeling that, and I thought, well, maybe it's because I've spent quite a lot of time on my own, and it's just an adjustment to people. But it wasn't just that; it was the fact that suddenly people were going out and doing stuff and arranging things more like together, and you couldn't physically, you couldn't go and do that. And it's like another hurdle that you sort of have to kind of go, right, okay, I need to accept this and I need to accept that. And now I feel it's more, I've got into a sort of groove with that. But it's like every new change of what people can do and you can't is a thing, isn't it? And actually, a friend of mine organised a couple of holidays, and I wouldn't have organised them because I don't work full time. I don't really think I need a holiday, but I'm really glad that she did. And they were just places like where I could just kind of really chill out. But even then, one day we were up north, and one day a few people were going cycling, and that's what we would normally do. And having those people, like, they were just getting ready to go cycling. I mean, I knew that's how it was going to be, and I, taking my guitar, and I was quite happy just to play music. But then I was watching them sort of get ready and be excited and go out, and I just had like I had a big cry.
yeah.
And it wasn't because I knew I wasn't able to go, and I was fine with that. It was more that I think I was just having a big cry for all the times that I couldn't do stuff. And
It's something about seeing someone else doing something that you
yeah,
can't do and want to do,
yeah,
isn't it? That makes
yeah,
you feel all of
it's,
those things again.
yeah, and it's right in your face. And
Yeah,
she just sort of gave me a big hug, and then I was fine. And they went off, and I spent the day having a bit of a walk and a bit of a swim and a bit of a guitar play, and I had a lovely day. But right in that moment, all I wanted to do was get on my bike and go
yeah,
for
yeah. It's not
30
fair. You
miles,
just want to go inside. Yeah,
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 and just be like
mm,
having that feeling. And I am a bit of an all or nothing person. So I mean, I've hardly been on my bike. I'm a bit like, well, if I can't do a 30-mile bike ride, and not that, I mean, I don't do lots and lots of miles, but if I can't do what I normally do, I'm not going to do it at all. I'm a bit like that. But
mm,
also, I think it's that thing about not knowing how much you can do before you make yourself ill.
yeah. And
So
if you set off on a bike ride, you've got to get back.
that's the beauty of a swim, or even like,
Yeah,
this is kind of really sad, but I've got into gardening in the last year, with
me too.
lockdown and the garden. Have you? Have you? Oh,
Well,
so it's not just an over 50 thing then.
oh no, I have. It was more of a guilt thing actually. The gardens around us are
A
absolutely
beautiful pet.
beautiful,
Yeah,
and there are people that have obviously spent
a lot of time.
years and years and years doing this, and the driveway here we haven't even weeded it,
Yeah,
and I thought, right,
I
So
can do,
I've just, bought a
yeah,
few pots, and I've had to do it in bits.
yeah,
I can't do too much at once.
yeah.
But if it's finding that something, even if it's not what
I
you want to
know,
do, and it makes me smile if I've been out and I come back to the house and I see my hanging basket and I think, that's really nice.
I know. Oh, absolutely. And I think, like, even with that, I sort of started doing more of that and thinking, oh, well, it's not exercise because I'm not on my bike or
Oh,
I'm
but
not.
it's quite physical, isn't it?
Yeah. And then I did something. Yeah, I did a day of it at some point, and I was knackered the next day. And I thought, well, it is exercise actually. That I sort of realised that everyone says, "Oh, gardening is exercise." I used to think, no, it's
It's
not. You know.
ridiculous.
But, yeah. So that's again, you can just do a little bit of that, and then you can stop. And it's about finding those kind of things, you know. And actually, do you know what? I think it's quite good practice about what it's probably going to be like when we get old. You know, because you're not going to have the energy that you have when you're really young. I mean, you're
Yeah.
just not really, are you? And so I think to have that patience with yourself about what can I do and what can't I do, and not to be frustrated about that, which is really, it's a real learning curve, but it's really important, I think, you know, and not, you know, just to be like all right with that. And that's I mean, that sounds really simple, but if you're used to, I mean, I tell loads of people about you and you and Jackie and play the cello with, and she usually climbs 15 mountains at the weekend and stays in a sleeping bag on the top of them, and now some days she can't get off the sofa. And I tell people that because it makes people understand what it's like, because people think, oh, well, this person's like this and now they're like that, and they go, oh, that's terrible. That's really, that's what it does. That's what it can do to people. I'm like, yeah, it's not, you know, this isn't someone who wants to lie down or sit on the sofa or.
It's yeah. I mean, my symptoms aren't anywhere near as bad as a lot of people's, and you get that sort of like, oh well, is it really that bad then? And one of my friends said to me, he said, just because someone else has it worse than you doesn't mean that it's not rubbish.
No, of course
It
not.
doesn't invalidate how you're feeling.
Of course
Um,
not.
and I thought that was quite useful because, I do sometimes look at some of the other people who, have much, much worse symptoms, and I sort of feel like I'm almost a bit of a fraud sometimes. And then actually I look at my
Absolutely.
own symptoms and I realise actually it's totally awful for me as well.
Course, you know,
Um,
the bottom line is you can't live your life the way you did. That's
mm,
the bottom line, and
exactly.
that's a problem. That's a problem. That's, you know, and it's something that, well, you and I and everyone that's got it, it's like you're dealing with it all the time. You're dealing with it.
Hmm.
You
Yeah,
know,
it's not like it goes away.
how am I today? What can I do? This can't I do that? Can I organize that thing? Can't I do that? Oh, now I just feel ill. I need to lie down. You know, whatever it is, it's like it's this thing, isn't it? It's that we didn't used to have. That of course
It's
it affects your life. And sure, yeah, we're not sort of lying in bed the whole time, thank goodness. But that doesn't mean that it hasn't kind of had a massive impact on your life, you know,
exactly, you still can't do all the things that you should be able to do and that you need to do.
and
So,
want to do and want
yeah,
to do.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Your life isn't all about literally working and existing. You've got
no,
to have some quality of life as well.
exactly,
Um,
exactly.
and if you can't do that, then you sort of, it's hard. So with work for you, I mean, you're self-employed, aren't you?
Hmm.
Do you find yourself worrying about being able to take on work and then not being able to do it? And
Yeah, I do. I do. I mean, like I was saying about the youth club, I had to stop that. And actually, quite a bit of teaching, you know, maybe people have not been able to come to teaching because they've had different things going on because of the pandemic. It's been very bitsy. And actually, sometimes I think, oh, that's not good and I should be building it up. And and then I just think, actually, it's quite good. Otherwise, I would be constantly having to contact people saying, well, I can't do a lesson this
yeah,
week. And so in some ways, that's not bad. And you know, in fact, I'm trying to think now about what I do next, about getting another job or taking something on regularly. And I do have to think, am I up to it? Just because I've started feeling better for a few weeks now, maybe I need to leave it a bit longer before I see what I'm up to. And
I mean, the
so,
number of people that on this, again on the Facebook group, they've said, "Oh, I feel better. I'm going back to work and all of this," and then 2 months later
I
they're
know,
back and they said, "Yeah, yeah, don't do that." And you
I
sort of
know,
think, how long
I
are you
need to
going to
give,
have this hanging over you?
yeah, I need to
You could
give
feel better
myself.
for 3 months, and then is it still going to come back? And it's again, it's a mental thing,
I
isn't it?
know. I need to
It's
give myself a bit of time to see I'm okay. I've applied for a job recently that I mean I didn't get an interview for, and in some ways I thought, oh well, then maybe that's quite good because maybe I'm not up to it. And And actually, do you know, when I went on this week away up north the other week, and the same friend was talking about organising something in September, and I was thinking, no, I can't go on another holiday. I need to work, I need to this, I need to that. And then I just thought, actually, it's exactly what I need this year, another holiday. She's going up north in September, so I think I'm going to take the week. And it's just sort of a week of just being somewhere different with my guitar, and, you know, maybe going for a walk if I can, and some other people there, so that you're not on your own. And I feel like, well, I haven't worked really hard, so I don't deserve the holiday. But actually, you know,
you've been ill for so
I've
long.
been
Of course, you
ill.
deserve it.
Yeah. So maybe I deserve the holiday, and
Yeah.
who did needs to deserve a holiday anyway? And I know earlier on this year, I kind of thought to myself, I think it's going to take this year to get better. And I don't want to think that I'm going to get better before the end of this year, because then if I don't, I'll be disappointed. And I mean, it's very unpredictable, isn't it? But I do feel like I'm physically getting a bit stronger, you know. So mentally, I've sort of given myself, you know, into next year of, if I'm all right, then I can say, right, I could take on a new job or more regular teaching or whatever, and really sort of put my back into organizing the next thing. But maybe this year's for sort of going, okay, I'll try and do a bit of stuff, and then, oh, there's a week to go up north and sit with my guitar and just take in the view.
Yeah. I think
And
we've sort of just got to chug along as we can, haven't we? Give ourselves that time and hope that time will
yeah, and you know, we
sort it.
might go into another lockdown or whatever. So if there's a holiday to go on in September of just sitting taking the view, take it. You know, and then, yeah, give yourself the time and just think, well, maybe next year you'll be able to go, right, okay, I'm this bit stronger, I can manage. As humans, we struggle with the lack of not being in control, and the uncertainty, the not being able to say, I'm going to be able to do that. A friend that was saying to me, well, I hadn't spoken to her for ages, and she was saying, well, you know, are you okay to just have the day in bed and not do work and not this? And I thought, well, yeah, I am actually. And she said, well, that's great. That's a good position to be in. And I thought, it really is, you know. And, you know, fundamentally, the bottom line is money. Money is the stress. Money is the thing that, you know, apart from it's rubbish to feel ill and not being able to go for a bike ride, but actually what's everyone terrified of? That they can't look after themselves or look after other people. And we're a slave to that. And that's a really awful thing, that when we're ill, we can't just go, yeah, just be ill. Until you're better, be ill, because there are people to look after you. Or, you know, unfortunately, we're all, you know, this is where I get all Marxist, but we're all tied into the capitalist system, aren't we, of the fact that we need to earn this thing called
Yeah.
money. And,
If we
you
don't
know,
have money, we can't look after ourselves, and then we get worse.
and
Um,
possibly other people, and that we're
and if
a failure. And actually, you know, we're not, we're just not well. We're not any of those other things. We're just not well. We put all those other things on it. Anyway,
yeah.
that's the end of my Marxist rant.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for talking to me.
Thanks, Jackie.
It's so nice to hear your side. Well, it's horrible to hear it, but you know what I mean.
I do. Yeah.
It's
We can identify with each other, and
yes.
that's a very helpful thing, isn't it?
Thank you so much, Chiara, for being on the podcast, and to you for listening. I'm going to close out the podcast today with this song that Chiara has written. It's called Tyrannosaurus, which is her pet name for long COVID, because the headaches that she used to get were like a monster in her head. Thank you so much for listening, and please look out for the next episode of the Long COVID podcast.
Taking care of myself, looking after my health, lining up the vitamins, wash them down one by one, losing my rock and roll. It's my body, but I'm not in control. I don't know your name. I'm trying to get along with you, Tyrannosaurus. You won't get the best of me, Tyrannosaurus. Tyrannosaurus. Go on, take what you can see, Tyrannosaurus. If you have to make this home, go easy on me, please. I'm all alone. Lying here in the dark, it's my body, I'll show you who's in charge. Now, I don't know your game, just trying to get through to you, Tyrannosaurus. You won't get the best of me, Tyrannosaurus. Go on, take what you can see, Tyrannosaurus.